My name is Alicia Criado. My background is, my parents are both Afro-Peruvian, and I live in Washington, D.C.
My name is Roberto. I'm Alicia's dad. I'm certainly the Afro-Peruvian he was referring to, and I now live in Miami.
How do you both identify?
Well, I usually say I'm Afro-Latina, and people will ask what that means. Depending on the people I'm with, I may just say Black, but I know I'll always get a follow-up question of but where really are you from? So it varies. It really depends on who I'm with and if people are interested in knowing.
For you to go into
more details.
What about you, Roberto? How do you
I identify myself as Black, a Black Peruvian. Yeah. Afro-Peruvian occasionally, but primarily Black Peruvian.
Why?
Well, I think it's obvious. I've always have had an affinity with Black people, even Black Peruvians in my youth. Most of my closest friends, my most intimate friends were all Black Peruvians, to the chagrin of my families, because I come, as most Blacks in Latin America, from a mixed family group, if you may. My maternal grandmother happened to be Italian, and my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was an Afro-Peruvian, which unfortunately I never met. He passed away before I was born. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's obvious that you're of African descent?
Oh yeah, I think so. I feel that way, and I identify myself as such. Yeah.
And why do you say, to the chagrin of your family, that you have...
Well, as I said, because some of my family members had a particular disposition towards Blacks in general, not primarily me, but in general, which is quite common in Peru at least.
What about in this country, in the United States? How do people identify you when they see you upon meeting you?
Well, for me, definitely, I identify or associate with a lot of Blacks in the U.S. And most of the time, I think the assumption is that, yes, I'm Black, but maybe mixed. So maybe, one of my parents is Black, one is not. But when I do meet other Latinos, and especially now here on the East Coast, because I grew up in California, most of them usually assume that I'm a Latina. So that's been kind of a newer experience later in my life.
And what do they say when you say, hey, I'm Peruvian?
Well, then usually it's not too shocking. They'll say, oh, okay, yeah, you look a little different. Your name is Alicia. So it's usually not a big surprise, but it's usually kind of like, oh, well, that's different. And especially the common, and I know you can relate, I know some Peruvians, but I've never met any that look like you. So
they learn something.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do they use the word negro in Peru?
Yes, they do, of course, especially when somebody's referring to us. They say, well, los negros, or that negro or negra. However, among ourselves, we tend to call ourselves, which is a taboo word here in this country, but not in Peru, zambos. We refer to each other as zambos. In fact, I call Alicia Samba, and she calls me Sambo. But that is an endearment term. It's like the N-word, if you may, among Blacks here in this country. Yeah.
More generally speaking,
sure.
It's a general term.
Yeah.
What do you think the American perception of Latinos is?
I think the perception is, automatically someone from Mexico or that could look like what they think stereotypically is Mexican, kind of straight hair, kind of more mestizo or indigenous looking. That you eat tortillas, beans and rice, and kind of that's that culture. So obviously that goes out the window when we include all of Latin America, and especially the Black or African populations throughout Latin America. Because even within the same country, there's different cultures. Among Peruvians, it's not the same to just say, well, I'm Peruvian. If you're Afro-Peruvian, there's unique, layers to that identity, I think.
Why is it important to say Afro-Peruvian?
For me personally, because I was born in this country, and so to be able to kind of acknowledge my heritage and to acknowledge that, like I said, it's kind of a unique layer or kind of segment of Peruvian culture that wasn't always accepted. To me, it's, a way of kind of identifying with that. And I think more and more I find I think second generation, second generation, adding all of these hyphens, right, to kind of your identity of Afro-Peruvian American or whatever it may be. Because to just leave it as Peruvian, obviously that's not quite accurate. To leave it just as black, I feel like also kind of places me in this big bubble of blackness. So I think that's why it makes sense for me.
Did you pass that idea?
Oh, most definitely, yes. I've always been identifying myself as a black man, and it was heightened, if you may, when I first came to this country, which was in the mid-'60s. Actually, I arrived in the U.S. in '66, at the height or the beginning, if you may, of the Black Revolution. And to me, it was an awakening. It was a validation, if you may, of what I've always felt as a black man in Peru, but never knew how to identify myself as, because of the mixture of the area in Lima where I grew up and my family mixture, if you may. And when I came to New York, as I said, in the mid to late '60s, it was an awakening for me. I became not only a man, I became a black man. And I remember on my first trip back to Peru, bringing all of those newly acquired realities as to who I was, and sharing that with not only my dad, but also friends that I grew up with. And they were completely taken aback. So, yes.
Did you get a full or well-rounded historical teaching or learning?
Oh, very much so. In fact, in Peru. No, actually, that actually came to me in New York.
What came to you?
Well, like as I said earlier, becoming a black man, I learned what that meant to me in New York at that time, and everything that was happening around me. Taking pride of being a black man, taking pride of, at the same time, being Peruvian, a black Peruvian. All of that came into being at that time. And of course, it was always a dream of mine, and I'm so glad that Alicia has inherited, if you may, all of that, because it was something that was very important to me. Yeah, very, very important.
Was that pride or, I guess, learning, awakening, would that have happened in Peru?
I doubt it. Because, as I said, there was this idea in Peru that, as we discussed earlier, that you had to, quote unquote, better the race. So being black was not something that you strived for. In fact, it's something that if you wanted to succeed and be viewed as a, how can I put it?
Kind of respected person.
Respected to a degree, yes. You had to be not black. Not black.
What about among Latinos? Did you feel that you fit in?
It's interesting. So I work now for a Latino civil rights group. And so I actually am around a lot of Latinos, probably more on a daily basis than I ever have, both at work and with community members. I think the fact that I speak Spanish is what really makes people kind of embrace me more. I think if I didn't speak Spanish, and even though having my name, Alicia Criado, I think there would still be kind of that, well, she's not quite one of us. But I think because of the language, I think that's kind of bridged some of those doubts. But I've noticed it. I mean, I think it is still a new evolving concept, even for Latinos, to acknowledge the presence of Africa in Latin America. I mean, I still think that that's an idea for many people that, it almost like it doesn't want it, people don't want to acknowledge it or accept that it's actually reality.
Alicia's mom is a Black Peruvian as well, from a mixed Indian and Black background, if you may. Mine is most Black and white, so I would be considered a mulatto. My grandmother was straight up Italian, blue, I'm from northern Italy of all places. So blue eyes, blonde hair, and the whole bit. And she happened to marry a Black Peruvian, and that's where the mixture, in fact, everybody tells me I look like my grandfather. I'm the darkest one, the same as Alicia mentioned earlier. I'm the darkest one in my family. If you were to look at my sister, you say, no, that's not your sister. But those are the mixtures that we have in Latin America,
Is that history or African history taught in schools in Peru?
Oh, not at all, not at all. In fact, the Black community, the Black Peruvian community is relatively small, if you may. And it's getting smaller and smaller due to a variety of reasons. One of them is mixing of ethnicities and the prevalence of the indigenous people of Peru. And to my surprise and sadness, because of this mixing, the number of true Black, I don't want to say true, Black Peruvians, if you may, is getting smaller and smaller. Last time I was in Lima, it's been a few years ago, I mean, it was very difficult to find a Black Peruvian, walking around the streets. Yeah, very difficult. And when you see one, you try to make eye contact and, hey, bro, here we are. There aren't that many of us. In a decade or so after I left Peru, the Black awareness of Peru sort of like grew. There was a group that is still pretty much popular, a great deal of popularity in Lima. It's called Peru Negro. And that all came about after I left Peru. And in fact, Alicia's mother was at one time a member, one of the original members of Peru Negro. And we met, her mother and I, on one of my trips back to Lima. A friend of mine took me to one of their rehearsals. And I mean, I was in seventh heaven, because here it was, my culture, if you may, my people, something that I had never have had an opportunity except in very close friendships growing up. But I had never seen that displayed in any positive manner as I did when I went back and I saw Peru Negro, and I was, oh my God, this is great, this is really, really good. Yeah. Our music and our way of being, and, yeah.
Do you think it's important to preserve those traditions, that Afro tradition?
Yes, very much so, yes, indeed. Yeah.
Do you feel that the African descendant population in Peru have a pride in that history?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. At least, as like I said, I've been so far removed from that culture. But like I said, the times that I've been back and what I'm able to see now with the advent of the internet, you have a lot more access, if you may, to various groups and activities that are taking place. And I always make it a point to see what's going on in the Black community in Peru and check out videos about Peru Negro and other groups that are not as well known as Peru Negro. And it fills me with pride and joy to see that even though it is a rather small community, but it's a very proud community that has embraced our African roots.
When I haven't been to Peru in a while, but I remember walking around like one of the main markets there, and they had a lot of different products that had caricatures on them representing Black people. And I remember feeling like, wow, this is pretty shocking. I mean, you don't see that in the US walking around. Humor in Latin America, I find, is so slapstick, right? It's like people falling, people making fun of each other. And with that does become kind of making fun of other races and cultures and, making fun of Chinos, right? Everyone who looks Asian is Chino from China. And I feel like the Black piece does come up.
Do you think that racism is a real problem in Peru?
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. I still feel that way. In fact, sometimes now that you mention this, on my perusing through YouTube, I find some comedy shows on TV that are available through YouTube in which indeed this character of the black man, dumb and lazy and can dance well and probably plays excellent soccer, is portrayed quite vividly, and I find it offensive, very much so.
Today, still in
Today,
2012.
oh
yeah.
yes, today, very much so.
Yeah.
And people laugh, and I don't find anything funny about that, Also the term which I've always criticized, mostly Peruvians, and it's used in other cultures, in other countries in Latin America, and that is the term negroide. I've always viewed that as an insult, if you may. Why couldn't that just be black? Why does it have to be negroide? You know what I mean?
Negroid. Yeah.
And
Do you have anything else to add?
Oh, this is a real pleasure. I mean, this is great.
This is great.
Yes, to have an opportunity to speak about issues that are definitely important, not just to us, but to everyone, and to have met you, and for you to have given us an opportunity to do so.
You don't usually get a chance to talk about these topics?
I think maybe internally among, ourselves, if we have a conversation, maybe other family members, but not really kind of in this kind of space, and to kind of get probed and ask, well, how did you feel, and what does that mean to you? Why is this important? I think, it doesn't happen enough. And I think the documentary series, obviously, and I've been seeing lately a lot more folks kind of getting active on trying to uncover and peel back the layers of Afro-Latinos, because we're kind of this new kind of discovered community. But it is, I think, has always been there, and now people are finally kind of realizing, oh wow, wow, yes.
Exótica.